Hey y'all, welcome back. This is Michelle from Michelle's Empty Nest, and today we are going to do a flip through of my completed childhood documented 80s style album. It is done. It is chunky and thick and heavy. I weighed it. It was about 1.5 ounces short of 2 pounds. So it is a nice hefty little album and I absolutely love it. So I have gone ahead and done what I mentioned a couple times along the way that I would do at the end. And I printed another copy of this paper that I used for the cover and laminated it and put it onto the cover. So actually I traced around the paper using the cover as a guide and went ahead and cut it first and laminated it so then I could get the lamination closed but still having that little bit of closure there. After I ran it through my laminator, and I also did it on the back cover as well. So now it looks more complete. It's definitely going to be more durable this way. And my vision of this looking and feeling like a trapper keeper, you know, has kind of come to fruition. So I'm not going to do a detailed discussion of each page. That would take way too long. And there are 11 videos in this playlist where I only do 2 pages at the time. So I discuss each page and the content within it fairly detailed. And there are also posts over on Instagram that show all of the close-up pictures as well, and there are close-up pictures at the end of each video. I have created a highlight bubble, so if you want to just try to find those posts over on Instagram, you can go and look at my highlight bubbles and it'll say, I think it says child doc 80s or something like that. I had to abbreviate it down. But all of the posts from over on Instagram will be there, including the prompt list and my album setup. So let's go ahead and begin. I did update this because remember I divided Mall Spree into 2 parts and then I had that bonus category. So I wanted my prompt list to match what actually ended up being in my album. So I did update that. And then I just started off with pictures of me kind of spread out through the 80s. So at this age would have been right around 1980. I would have been about 10, and then on up to 12th grade when I was 17. And so I kind of just, you know, did that little bit of a collage there. I used those shimmer markers. Let me grab them real quick. They're Doodle Dazzles, I think is the name, and they're called shimmer markers. I use those throughout because that was something that I had in the 80s and I thought it just really gave it that mood and feel. And that's really what I'm going for in this album, is that it's something that kind of seems like 15-year-old Michelle may have done this. So my first prompt was first game system, and so I journaled a bit about my Atari that I got for my 12th birthday, and I only journaled on a few occasions because to me the title and the pictures really did its purpose for most of the prompts, so I didn't really feel the need to do a lot of journaling throughout. So I did a picture of the Atari and then some of my favorite games. And then I had girl bands and hair bands. They were both big in the 80s, and I wanted these pages to kind of play nicely together. So they're very similar, just kind of a different color scheme, but the same basic setup. So that was those. For favorite sitcoms, I did a flip out. I have a few interactive elements within the album, not a lot, but because I was trying to keep this fairly simple. I did journal about these because as a family, when I was growing up, we would all gather up in our den after supper and we would sit down and watch a lot of these sitcoms together. So I wanted to include that little nugget there. So that is for favorite sitcoms. And then for number 5, top toys, I won't go through all of these, but I did this toy box and just cut out this part of the photo. I actually found the toy box on a Facebook marketplace. That was the best straight on shot I could find because I had this toy box when I was younger. And then my thought was this was kind of like the toy bag within the toy box. Sorry for the rattle. And I printed off, I think there ended up being about 20 toys that I printed off. And because I had them, I remember playing with them. And so I just wanted to include as many as I could. I did these on matte photo paper, so I was able to write on the back what each one was. You know, I thought if some years down the road, someone else or, you know, maybe a grandchild, if I ever have one, was looking at this, they would be able to see what the names of the toys were. And speaking of matte photo paper, most of my background papers are on matte photo paper because you get just a crisp, clear, no lines, no streaks, no splotches. The color is much more bold and saturated into that matte photo paper than just printing it onto cardstock. So if I'm going to be doing a bright, colorful background, I use matte photo paper. It's a Canon matte photo paper. All right, so here is some 80s lingo, and I love this page. I don't know if it's just kind of the grid nature or what, but it's one of my absolute favorites. And so it was a lot of fun to think back on things like Gag Me with a Spoon, Grody to the Max. There was just a lot of funny things that we used to say in the 80s. I wanted to include the Brat Pack for sure because they were in a lot of the movies that you know, I remember from the 80s. They were just very memorable. Some of them were considered heartthrobs, or some of them were considered like little fashion icons. So I wanted to include the ones that were considered the actual Brat Pack. There were a few other actors and actresses that starred in some movies with them, but these were the actual official ones. And I just wrote their first name. I think I went back and did that after I had already like photographed this and everything. So I did just put their first names on there. For best books, there were a few that were series. So Sweet Valley High, Hardy Boys, Couples, and Nancy Drew. So I just found the first book in that series and printed those off. And then also I printed Flowers in the Attic and It. There were other books by those authors, but those were ones that just kind of stood out that I remember reading for sure in the 80s. Fashion icons, and this is another place where you can see what I mean about the quality of printing on that matte photo paper, how it just shows up so much better and just makes a beautiful print. And I enjoyed pulling in this little cluster ephemera piece that was in the digital kit that I used, and I will have the kit linked below. I used a couple of different ones. And so I picked these 6 ladies because they all definitely have their own style, but they all scream 80s. And so I wanted to include each of those. And again, I just wrote their first names on there. For computers, I wanted to do the computer that I had at home, which could barely be called a computer, but I had the Commodore 64. I think I got it like for Christmas, maybe, I don't know, 14 or 15, maybe earlier, I'm not sure. I knew enough basic coding to like make my name run across the screen in different sizes and different colors, and that was about it. And then at school, we used the TRS-80, which was like this one-piece deal, and it was, I think it stands for the Radio Shack is who made it. All right, for snacks, I just did collage instead of printing them and then cutting them out and adhering them again. I did that with some of the topics where there were a lot of pictures that took up the overall portion of the paper. I just felt like it was kind of a waste of time to cut it and then cover back that much of the paper, if that made sense. It probably didn't, but it just seemed like it was, a waste of my time to cut all these out and glue them back down when there wasn't much space left. And I think it also allowed me to kind of play with the sizes a little bit more because I could see exactly what they were going to look like in Photoshop. All right. Then we have heart throbs. So I enjoyed doing this one, pulling all these colorful pieces. And this photo is actually from the movie The Outsiders. And so it has most of the guys that were considered heartthrobs in the 80s. Not all of them, but most of them. And so I just used my little notebook punch and made this seem like something I had just torn out of a notebook and written their names on. For Saturday morning cartoons, I chose these 10. Some of them I remember loving, and a couple of them, especially Thundercats, I remember watching with my brother, who is 7 years younger than I am. And so towards the late 80s, when I was in my late teens, I wasn't really big on watching Saturday morning cartoons, but I remember sitting with him and watching the cartoons and just seeing his excitement over it. For my collections, I did this one a little different. I did print out the frame cluster that came in the kit onto matte photo paper, and then I took my X-Acto knife and trimmed out all around the frame because I wanted to have the glossy photos actually in behind there. I wanted it to look, like the glossy photo, not just a flat one piece of paper. So what I collected the most of was porcelain dolls, china dolls, and then cats as well. All right, so then I moved to a mixtape of the 80s, and I had such a hard time making myself stop picking songs because there were so many good songs, but I went with 18 on each side, and we know that a tape from the 80s would not have held 18 songs on each side, but we're playing pretend here. And then I did that bonus track of Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up, just because Rick Roll was, such a funny thing there for a while. And I had mentioned in the video when I did this one, the process video for it, these weren't necessarily like all of my favorite bands, but the songs themselves scream the 80s. They, just speak to the times and the styles and just how the 80s were. So I just couldn't cut any of them off the list. Then we had 80s hair, and so I pulled in a couple of pieces and added it to this cluster. Just put the phrase, the higher the hair, the closer to Jesus. That was something that we used to just kind of joke about. And then I included 6 different hairstyles. Well, actually 5 different hairstyles, and one of them is in a his and hers because both people had mullets back then. And then number 17 is Blockbuster Nights. Now, Leilani had this one on her prompt list, and I wanted to keep it because we didn't have a Blockbuster in my little hometown for several years, but we had like the little mom and pop video rental stores. And so I just found an image online that kind of reminded me of what they looked like. And then I wanted to also tell the story because not only did we rent the movies, but we had to rent a VCR. At the time, none of my friends or I had a VCR at our house. And so I think it was like $5 or $10 for the weekend. You could rent these huge, heavy VCRs. And we'd just get a stack of movies and make a weekend out of it. And T-Town is, it stands for Thomaston, which is where I was born, and lived there, until after I graduated from high school. And, but I no longer live there now. But that's just kind of the little name, the nickname that everyone calls it is T-Town. All right, so then for number 18, this might be the only one where I have white backgrounds on both sides, but I did not want to put all these little bitty movie posters onto a busy background. I thought they would get lost, and so I just went with the stars that I thought were appropriate when we're talking about movies and blew those up. And then this was another one where I just made the collage in Photoshop to save a lot of time that just really wasn't necessary to glue these down. And one thing that I don't think I've mentioned yet, but I mentioned in most of the videos along the way, a lot of the pages are the same pattern. I just left one kind of as the size it came into in Photoshop, or in this case, blew it up bigger. I just kept dragging it out. And then the other side is shrank down very, very much. And so you'll see that on, you know, a lot of the different pages have that going on. So that was something that was kind of, you know, consistent throughout, as well as the numbers. I use these same numbers throughout the whole album. I like to do that sometimes just to, you know, kind of make it feel more cohesive. And they were just a Recollections brand from Michaels that I had a ton of, so I knew I'd have plenty to do the whole album. All right, so we already talked about movies. And then for favorite games, I went really bright and bold on this one. And again, just did the collage so I could really play with the sizes and just skip the step of having to cut them out and then adhere them again. All right, for number 20, this is the one that I ended up dividing into 2 sections because I wanted to talk about the stores of the malls in the 80s, some of which are no longer around, but they were, you know, big hot places to go in the 80s. And then I also included the arcade because, you know, there was always one of those, and then a food court because even though there's one here, I put one in this little collage as well because they all just kind of had that same look and feel about them. And then for 20-2, it's what's in my shopping bag. And so for this one, I printed out this bag, made it big enough to pretty well fill the paper, used my X-Acto to cut the slit, and then I did pictures of, we've got, you know, like cologne and jewelry and shirts and things for your hair and shoes and jeans and jackets and parachute pants and more stuff for your hair. So originally I was just going to slide the full pictures down into, like the whole collage down into these. I had 2 pages of that, but I thought, you know, when I was working with it, that to me, this seemed a little bit more like packages or single items sticking up out of the bag, and just gave it a little more texture to go ahead and cut those into strips. So that's what I did. All right, then we get to the honorable mention, because as I worked through finding all of these images, there were so many things that I came across that I thought, oh my goodness, that needs to be in my album. But it didn't really fit a particular category. And so I just came up with this honorable mention, put an Avery Index tab to let you know to pick it up, used a December Daily stamp set that I've used many times outside of December Daily. It just says so many memories, which was perfect. And then it's a flip up, so it has just all these different things that were, some of them could have been bought in a store, but it was kind of like little fads or things that we made, like friendship pins and friendship bracelets, and, you know, just the odd thing that we did, peg legging our jeans and things like that. So I wanted to include some of those things. And then I decided to do a final thoughts. Even though I didn't feel the need to journal much during making the album, when I got to the end, I kind of wanted to just put some of my thoughts down on paper and kind of wrap up what I was doing. And so I did that. And there, I will put a close-up of this because it has not shown up in any video yet, I don't think. Or no, it may have been in the last video. I will put a close-up of the journaling at this at the end of this video. There's no way I'm going to try to attach all the pictures to the end of this video. That would make it very long, but I will put this at the end. And then to finish it out, I found this quote from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It says, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it." And it was in several different options, you know, different styles and fonts, but I liked this one that had, to me, it sort of looks like a cross between tie-dye and glitter and sparkles. And so I thought it kind of seemed a little more 80s-ish. So I printed that off to put in the back of my album. And then we finish up with the other cover that I laminated and then attached to this album with score tape. So that is the album. That's her. She's done. And I'm so excited to be able to put it on to my shelf. So I appreciate you stopping by today. And another last shout out to Leilani from Leilani_Scraps on Instagram and Leilani Scraps here on YouTube for coming up with this main idea and inviting us to play along and adapt as needed. If you enjoyed this video, I would love a thumbs up down below. And if you have not already subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to consider doing that and becoming a part of my little YouTube family. You being here means more than you will ever know. So until I see you again, I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.